Hey guys, it's super early on Tuesday morning because today's the day I have to go grocery shopping for my Aunt Nina in Chattanooga. So I was going to do this before I left. We're going to read the second part of chapter 2. We're dividing it into every chapter into 3 parts because these chapters are long and I don't want our videos to be too long. In Lina's apartment, layers of worn rugs and carpets covered the floor, making it soft but uneven underfoot. Against one wall squatted a sagging couch with round wooden balls for legs, and on the couch were blankets and pillows, so many that you had to toss some on the floor before you could sit down. Against the opposite wall stood 2 wobbly tables that held a clutter of plates and bottles, cups and bowls, unmatching forks and spoons, little piles of scrap paper, bits of string wound up in untidy wads, and a few stubby pencils. There were 4 lamps, 2 tall ones that stood on the floor and 2 short ones that stood on tables. And in uneven lines up near the ceiling were hooks that held coats and shawls and nightgowns and sweaters, shelves that held pots and pans, jars with unreadable labels, and boxes of buttons and pins and tacks. Where there were no shelves, the walls had been decorated with things of beauty. A label from a can of peaches, a few dried yellow squash flowers, a strip of faded but still pretty purple cloth. There were drawings, too. Lina had done the drawings out of her imagination. They showed a city that looked somewhat like Ember, except the buildings were lighter and taller and had more windows. One of the drawings had fallen to the floor. Lina retrieved it and pinned it back up. She stood for a minute and looked at the pictures. Over and over, she'd drawn the same city. Sometimes she drew it as seen from afar. Sometimes she chose one of its buildings and drew it in detail. She put in stairways and street lamps and carts. Sometimes she tried to draw the people who lived in the city, though she wasn't good at drawing people. Their heads always came out too small, and their hands looked like spiders. One picture showed a scene in which people of the city greeted her when she arrived, the first person they had ever seen to come from elsewhere. They argued with each other about who should be the first to invite her home. Lina could see this city so clearly in her mind that she almost believed it was real. She knew it couldn't be. The book of the city of Ember, which all children studied in school, taught otherwise. "The city of Ember was made for us long ago by the builders," the book said. "It is the only light in the dark world. Beyond Ember, the darkness goes on forever in all directions." Lina had been to the outer borders of Ember. She had stood at the edge of the trash heaps and gazed into the darkness beyond the city, the unknown regions. No one had ever gone far into the unknown regions, or at least no one had gone far and returned. And no one had ever arrived in Ember from the unknown regions either. As far as anyone knew, the darkness did go on forever. Still, Lina wanted the other city to exist. In her imagination, it was so beautiful, and it seemed so real. Sometimes she longed to go there and take everyone in Ember with her. But she wasn't thinking about the other city now. Today she was happy right where she was. She set Poppy on the couch. "Wait here," she said. She went into the kitchen where there was an electric stove and a refrigerator that no longer worked and was used to store glasses and dishes so Poppy wouldn't get at them. Above the refrigerator were shelves holding more pots and jars, more spoons and knives, a wind-up clock that Granny always forgot to wind, and a long row of cans. Lina tried to keep the cans in alphabetical order so she could find what she wanted quickly, but Granny always messed them up. Now she saw there were beans at the end of the row and tomatoes at the beginning. She picked out a can labeled baby drink and a jar of boiled carrots, opened them, poured the liquid into a cup and the carrots into a little dish, and took these back to the baby on the couch. Poppy dribbled baby drink down her chin. She ate some of her carrots and poked the others between the couch cushions. For the moment, Lina felt almost perfectly happy. There was no need to think about the fate of the city right now. Tomorrow, she would be a messenger. She wiped the orange goop off Poppy's chin. "Don't worry," she said. "Everything will be all right." The messenger's headquarters was on Clothing Street, not far from the back of the gathering hall. When Lina arrived the next morning, she was greeted by Messenger Captain Alice Fleary, a bony woman with pale eyes and hair the color of dust. "Ah, new girl," said Captain Fleary to the other messengers, a cluster of 9 people who smiled and nodded at Lina. "I have your jacket right here," said the captain. She handed Lina a red jacket like the one all messengers wore. It was only a little too large. From the clock tower of the gathering hall came the deep, reverberating bong. 8 o'clock, cried Captain Fleary. She waved her long arm. "Take your stations." As the clock sounded 7 more times, the messengers scattered in all directions. The captain turned to Lina. "Your station," she said, "is Gone Square." Lina nodded and started off, but the captain caught her by the collar. "I haven't told you the rules," she said. She held up a knobby finger. 1. When a customer gives you a message, repeat it back to make sure you have it right. 2. Always wear your red jacket so people can identify you. 3. Go as fast as possible. Your customers pay 20 cents for a message, no matter how far you have to take it. Lina nodded. "I always go fast." 4, the captain went on. Deliver the message only to the person it's for, no one else. Lina nodded again. She bounced a little on her toes, eager to get going. Captain Fleary smiled. "Go," she said, and Lina was off. She felt strong and speedy and sure-footed. She glanced at her reflection as she ran past the window of the furniture repair shop. She liked the looks of her long dark hair flying out behind her, her long legs in their black socks and her flapping red jacket. Her face, which had never seemed especially remarkable, looked almost beautiful because she looked so happy. As soon as she came into Garn Square, a voice cried, "Messenger!" Her first customer! It was old Natty Prine calling to her from a bench where he always sat. "This goes to Ravenette Pearson's, 18 Silverton Square," he said. "Bend down." She bent down so her ear was close to his whiskery mouth. The man said in a slow, hoarse voice, "My stove is broke. Don't come for dinner. Repeat." Lina repeated the message. "Good," said Natty Prine. He gave Lina 20 cents, and she ran across the city to Silverton Square. There she found Ravenette Pearson's also sitting on a bench. She recited her message to him. "Old turnip head," he growled. "Lazy old flea face. He just doesn't feel like cooking. No reply." Lina ran back to Garn Square, passing a group of believers on the way. They were standing in a circle, holding hands, singing one of their cheerful songs. It seemed to Lina that there were more believers than ever these days. What they believed in she didn't know, but it must make them happy. They were always smiling. Her next customer turned out to be Mrs. Polster, the teacher of the 4th-year class. In Mrs. Polster's class, they memorized passages from the book of the City of Ember every week. Mrs. Polster had charts on the wall for everything, with everyone's name listed. If you did something right, she made a green dot by your name. If you did something wrong, she made a red dot. "What you need to learn, children," she always said in her resonant, precise voice, is the difference between right and wrong in every area of life. And once you've learned the difference," here she would stop and point at the class, and the class would finish the sentence, "you must always choose the right." In every situation, Mrs. Polster knew what the right choice was. Now, here was Mrs. Polster again, looming over Lina, pronouncing her message. "To Anisette Lafronde, 39 Hum Street, as follows," she said. "My confidence in you has been seriously diminished since I heard about the disreputable activities in which you engaged on Thursday last. Please repeat." It took Lina 3 times to get this right. "Uh-oh, a red dot for me," she said. Mrs. Polster did not seem to find this amusing. Lina had 19 customers that first morning. Some of them had ordinary messages. I can't come on Tuesday. Buy a pound of potatoes on your way home. Please come and fix my front door. Others had messages that made no sense to her at all, like Miss Polster's. But it didn't matter. The wonderful part about being a messenger was not the messages, but the places she got to go. She could go into the houses of people she didn't know, and hidden alleyways and little rooms in the backs of stores. In just a few hours, she discovered all kinds of strange and interesting things. For instance, Mrs. Sample, the mender, had to sleep on her couch because her entire bedroom, almost up to the ceiling, was crammed with clothes to be mended. Dr. Felina Tower had the skeleton of a person hanging against her living room wall, its bones all held in place with black strings. I study it, she said when she saw Lina staring. I have to know how people are put together. At a house on Callous Street, Lina delivered a message to a worried-looking man in whose living room was completely dark. I'm saving on light bulbs, the man said. And when Lina took a message to the Can Cafe, she learned that on certain days the back room was used as a meeting place for people who liked to converse about great subjects. Do you think an invisible being is watching over us all the time? She heard someone ask. Perhaps, asked someone else. There was a long silence. And then again, perhaps not. All of it was interesting. She loved finding things out, and she loved running. And even by the end of the day, she wasn't tired. Running made her feel strong and big-hearted. It made her love the places she ran through and the people whose messages she delivered. She wished she could bring all the good news that they so desperately wanted to hear. And that is the end of this chapter. I think we won't have any work today because I've got something for the end of the chapter tomorrow. Y'all have a good day. Bye.